أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Mominin Mominat, we are here with our English program. I will start with the recitation of Holy Quran and then we will connect with Syed Jafri for our English majlis. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العلي العظيم. Mominin Mominat, we will connect to our Dara Jafria's live feed where you can listen English Majlis.
محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا وإن الله لمع المحسنين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. We first of all send our condolences to the Imam of our time, the Maraje, all of you and your families, on the arrival of the 28th of Safar, the Rahlat of the Holy Prophet, and according to some traditions and some narrations, also the Shahadat of our second Imam, Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi salam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that tawfiq to continue to grieve for this family and celebrate their birth, inshallah, in the hopes that we end up emulating their path and becoming one of their true followers, inshallah. On a personal note, it is an honor and a privilege for me to be with the Idara Jafariya community this weekend. It would have been such an honor for me to be there in person with all of you, but of course we are in a very unique era. Everything is virtual, but inshallah with the hopes that Allah accepts all of our efforts, we'll be able to get some message across to all of you in your homes. 3 nights isn't a long time for us to really tackle a major topic. However, the luxury of being in the last few days of Safar, and when I say luxury, I mean the advantage is a better word perhaps, is the fact that I have now spent the past 2 months in this COVID Muharram era, and addressing or listening to the various questions that are asked and the various decisions that are made, be it by individuals, by families, by idara, by centers, by majalis, whatever the case may be. And I felt that it was a good topic to discuss this upcoming weekend, when I look at the concept of the heart versus the mind. Is the deen of Islam a qalbi deen or an aqli deen? Is it a deen of the intellect? Is it the deen of the heart? Is it all emotion and jazba and hub and bughz, love and hate? Or is it logical and reasonable and intellectual? And I say this only because I feel like every year in Muharram, as it is, this is a prime example right now, is that we feel like, I feel like there's a certain group of individuals who look at Imam Hussein through the lens of only emotion. Where the only purpose behind this entire commemoration and this miracle of Azadari is to grieve for Hussein, to cry for Hussein, to beat your chest for Hussein, to as much as possible attend the Ada and the Majalis of Hussein. Whether or not we understand why he did what he did, whether or not we understand him to be a path of emulation and imitation is secondary. Primary is the grief and the gham. That's one group. The other group are those individuals who wish to remove the extent of the grief and the gham in this Azadari and look at Imam Hussein through an intellectual lens. I've had, every year it seems, questions, comments, discussions, conversations about the fact that why do we cry so much for Imam Hussein? Why the black clothes and the black banners, and why is it that if on Shabi' Ashur, the night before the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein himself was busying himself and his ashab in worship, why do we cry that night and not worship Allah the entire night? And so thus, maybe if you understood why he did what he did, that becomes a primary focus. He didn't give his life on the plains of Karbala simply for us to cry our tears. Now both of those groups exist, and then of course there are other groups that have a nice mixture and a nice balance, I'll use that word, between the two. And so let's explore this topic a little bit in these next 3 nights. What is that balance? And especially in this COVID Muharram era, where I've had individuals ask me, I've had board of members of centers approach me, I've overheard conversations, I've seen decisions made by certain centers across the world and certain individuals across the world who host, for example, their house majas every single year, that if it was ever suggested to them that maybe perhaps this year in the wake of this pandemic that you don't have your annual house majlis, just for the sake of, God forbid something happens, someone gets sick, the virus spreads, then not only is that decision or that comment rejected, but the person who makes that comment, their aqidah, their belief, their tawakkul, their love for Imam Hussein is questioned, attacked almost, right? Those centers now that don't believe in this idea, or they believe, for example, that we don't live in a cause and effect world, right? This pandemic, this coronavirus, it's almost as if the Shias of Ali Muhammad are immune to it. Right? So, if we allow this pandemic now to overtake our azadari, then where is our reliance on Allah? Where is the idea of our manat towards Abul Fazl Abbas? Where is our love for Hussein? And so, these conversations, if led by the intellect and a logical 1 + 1 = 2 discussion, then maybe, we can get somewhere in our understanding. But the attack, the emotional attack I see on people's aqidah, or the idea where there are people who actually, label certain idaras or certain centers or certain masajid as weak in their iman or secular or Western, then that becomes a little bit of a problem. And that's why I thought it would be a good idea to look at this concept of the aql and the heart, the qalb and the intellect and the heart, and look at, to what extent, first of all, let's examine both of them separately, and how are these two now working together in this one lone insan that we call ourselves. In the process, I'm hoping that today's youth, today's millennials who really are struggling in the deen, struggling in this whole concept, especially in Azadari, they can understand the beauty of both aspects of it. I don't think anybody now is denying the intellect, nor do I think anybody is denying the heart. I do think that there seems to be sometimes an emphasis placed on one over the other, and then a judgment on those who may not practice what you're practicing in terms of the weight of each one. So this judgment, of course, is never healthy. The labeling of weak aqidah, the labeling of the fact that you don't believe in the alam of Abul Fazl Abbas, all these things where individuals who had the chance, let's say, to go to Arba'in this year for Imam Hussein's walk and chose not to because of Corona and pandemic, then people around in their circles are saying that it was a wrong decision, and you need to check your heart, and these things are a little bit unhealthy. So that's the little bit of the premise that I want to discuss. We'll look at various ayat of the Quran, understanding a few realities, of course. Initially, however, tonight in my opening discussion now, I want to look at the idea of what is the heart and what is the mind, and how each one operates. Looking at a little bit of a deeper discussion on the I-ness inside the human being. When I say I or me or Asad Jafri, for example, what exactly am I pointing to? Obviously, for the sake of my younger ones who may be listening, when I say the heart of the human being, I don't mean this physical organ that's beating right now inside of our chest. And inshallah, we'll try to explain what the qalb is in Islam throughout tonight's discussion. And then look at, ultimately, the thesis statement of this weekend for me is that which one is hakim over the other? Which one should govern the other? Which one is the most important of the two? To simply say that we have to be both equally may not be an accurate statement. And we'll look at, of course, supporting evidence from the Quran. And then ultimately, if we are able to establish, and tomorrow we will be, tomorrow night, as my cheap plug for my commercial for my majlis, tomorrow we'll be able to understand which one is hakim or has the role of governing the other. Then Sunday, as my last speech, we'll look at how can we strengthen the one that should be the governing factor. Anyways, it's a little bit of what the weekend looks like. But initially, let's examine the idea that we are dealing with two very, very opposite realities of the same internal kingdom. All of you should know, and you do know, I think, that we as a human being, we are very intricate. We're very complex. There are dimensions to us that even sometimes we can't recognize, or we can't label, we can't understand. There's a lot of things that we do that we end up asking ourselves, I wonder why I did that. Or there are reactions that we do that later on now, either we forget completely, like we literally have an out-of-body experience where, or we end up actually saying the words when we apologize to somebody who we may blow up at, that I'm sorry, that wasn't me. Right? These statements that we use loosely actually points to the fact that there are dimensions and powers and departments and avenues within us, within this grand universe Imam Ali refers to, that we are constantly learning about ourselves. Right? And in this movement towards self-actualization, part of that is to understand that there are various departments inside of us. Now, if this was a 10-lecture series, I would have the luxury of going through each one in intricate detail. But 3 nights, like I said, doesn't give me a lot of time, but anyways, to at least get us thinking about this topic. The first thing is to understand is that the qalb, or the heart of the human being, is that reality that fluctuates inside of you. So while the heart goes through a state of fluctuation, the mind is the one that's constantly growing. So think about the intellect or the mind or the reasoning or the logic of, I don't know, a 55-year-old adult as opposed to a 5-year-old child, right? Hopefully, there is a little bit of a difference, right? In the 50 years between the two ages, the individual has had a chance now to grow his or her intellect or logic. The heart, however, would not be classified as one that's growing. Instead, it's one that's fluctuating. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's soft. Sometimes it's accepting, sometimes it's denying, right? And the words that are used inside Islamic terminology is iqbal and idbar. Sometimes, for example, the example that I give often is our worship. For example, the worship, right? The more that our heart is into the worship, the more the worship becomes worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of times I get questions asked, and I'm sure all of you have the same question about huzur qalb inside of our salat, the presence of the heart inside of our salat. Meaning that, why is it, Sayyid, that the moment I say Allahu Akbar in my salat, 1,000 thoughts enter my mind, my heart becomes distracted until my tashahhud and salam, and then for some reason those same thoughts that entered, after a while they exited. And so the presence of the hearts now, there are more moments where we are dragged to our musalla. That 4 rakat salat al-dhuhr or asr, for example, becomes a monumental task. Then there are moments where we run to the musalla. And we don't want to get up after our salats. Okay? That's the reality of the heart. It's a fluctuating reality inside of us. The word qalaba in Arabic literally means to fluctuate. Ya muqallib al-qulub, or the fluctuator of hearts, we would call Allah. Ya muqallib. Muqallib is the one who fluctuates. Anyways, that's on one reality. So we have this reality inside of us that's constantly changing, and sometimes we go through extremes, right? Sometimes we deny the very thing we accepted last week. Sometimes we become very hard-hearted. Sometimes we become soft-hearted, right? And let me say this as well. It's not a black and white situation, meaning that there are moments where I would assume, or one would assume, for example, our spouses who know us very well, that this might cause him or her to have a very negative reaction. But the event happens and we end up actually showing softness towards that one thing, and the person beside us is shocked, but I can't believe that you're okay with this. Or we snap, or we have a hard-hearted moment, or we don't allow things to come in. I'm very cold towards people, and again, that might surprise the ones who know us very well, our family, that I'm surprised that you're being so cold about this, when usually you're soft about these things. So, it's not a cookie-cutter, black and white, situation, which is why this constant development of the heart is just that. It's constant until our last breath, right? Never should we be comfortable. The deen is a deen of harakat. The deen is a deen of movement, right? We don't allow complacency. We don't allow ourselves to be spiritually lazy. We don't allow ourselves to be comfortable in the level that we're at. Meaning that there should always be a moment where I should inch closer, right? Hadith says that a mu'min or a mu'minah is one whose yesterday is not the same as today. In fact, in one hadith it says that we are not accepting of the fact that my yesterday should be the same as today. After a while, I want to see progress. And when I don't see progress, I get disheartened. And then, of course, hopelessness, anxiety, all those things set in. So, that's the heart. Now, the mind, the intellect, is one, of course, that grows, gets stronger. Al-ilmu misbahul aql, the hadith says. Knowledge is the lantern of the intellect, right? The brighter the intellect, the better it is for your internal kingdom. What is it that brightens that aql? What becomes a lantern? Misbah in Arabic means a fanus, as they say in Farsi, or lantern, one that gives off light, one that illuminates a darkness around you. The fanus, or the lantern of the aql, is what? Is the ilm, the hadith says, is knowledge. Right? As we get older now, of course, we read, we educate ourselves, experience, wisdom, life, right? The more we live life, the smarter we get, the more we understand, our world view changes. All of that now strengthens the intellect and the aql. Now, when it comes to our deen development, it's understandable that there may be things that we understand, and I think a lot of you, and myself included, can attest to this. I might understand something, but to convert that understanding into amal and action sometimes is a difficult thing. So while it makes sense to me up here, it may not be accepted by me in here. That's why when you look at Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, he talks about the idea of ilm, knowledge. And ilm is identified or translated as knowledge. And this is really where a little bit of the weakness of the English language comes about. That, it's not so much knowledge. When we think about knowledge, we think about information. It's not really what ilm is. He in fact describes ilm to be a journey of nur. Okay? A suluk, right? A journey, a movement, of light, where it starts off with information in the brain. Okay, ma'alumat, as they say in Arabic and Urdu, of course. Ma'alumat comes from ilm. It's in our brain, it's information. For example, you sit in one of your classes for about half an hour, 45 minutes in an hour, and you learn, for example, physics or chemistry or bio, or whatever the case may be, or you learn, for example, calculus or finite or algebra, and that is being into our brain. Or, to make the point really relevant, you sit in a majlis, let's say, or a dars akhlaq, where the speaker or the ustad or the teacher now has decided to speak about morality, Islamic sciences, right? Talks about jealousy, talks about hypocrisy, talks about the ego, talks about all these things that all of us now battle. And you're sitting there and you're retaining the information. But that doesn't become ilm yet, according to Imam Sadiq. He says that ilm now has to now descend from the from the mind onto the heart. Where now what you know is what you believe in. What the mind accepts is what is now hosted by the heart. Okay. So think about those acts of worship that not only do you understand in your heart, but it's also very near and dear to you. There are many of you who have your own particular schedule or habits of worship. There are some, mashallah, who recite certain du'as and certain surahs. There are some who recite Ashura. There are some who, for example, who never miss one tasbih after every salat. Whatever the case, you have your own sort of regimen and your own sort of schedule and your own, setup in terms of worship. You include those acts of worship as your everyday process because why? Not only do you know the benefits of it, but you believe in those benefits. So now what is known by the mind is accepted by the heart, and then wherein truly completes itself is that from the heart it travels to amal. So what was once what you knew now becomes what you do. But the connector between what you know and what you do is the heart. Okay? It's not enough to know. A lot of our youth today know a lot. They know about God. They believe in Allah. They can prove God. But there seems to be a hesitation in worshiping that God. Always remember, one of the most vital roles the heart has to play in all of this is the fact that it is the heart that converts knowing Allah to worshiping Allah. You can sit there and have a class on religion, on theology, on ilmul kalam, on aqaid that talks about the idea of knowing Allah, all the various burhans and the proofs, burhan al-nazm, burhan al-wujud, all these different proofs that we have. All of that is information. You know it, you studied it, you understand it, you can even debate it. But does that information wake you up for Fajr in the morning or not? Does that information now allow you to go to Hajj when you have money or not? Does that information now make your heart sincere and void of jealousy and void of hatred and void of narcissism? That's the kamal of the information. The perfection and the ode and the peak of ilm is that the meme and the lam switch and it becomes amal. So from ilm, it becomes amal. The connector and the bridge between these two realities is the heart. The more it's purified, the faster the translation between ilm and amal. وَالنَّفْسِ وَمَا سَوَاهَا فَالْحَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Allah swears by the nafs and the maker of the nafs, the one that Allah says we've divinely inspired what is right and what is wrong, what is fujur, what is taqwa, and the one who is successful, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاها, who purifies his heart, who purifies his internal reality, who strengthens that bridge between ilm and amal. Remember, always remember, I, my family, all of you, will never be asked in the grave what you knew. Nobody will ask you for your PhD. Nobody will ask you for a copy of your thesis. Nobody will ask you, for example, were you an MD or not? What they will ask you is, what did you do in this world? إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. Surah Jumu'ah says that death is that reality that the very death that you farar from, that you run from, that you try to escape from. One day mulaqikum, there'll be a mulaqat between you and death. And that death will take you back to the alim and the shahid, the knower and the witness, and they will tell you, فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ نَبِّئُكُمْ from naba, meaning news. They'll inform you of what? Of what you've done in this world. Not who you are, not your last name, Sayyid or not Sayyid, how hard was your matam, nothing, none of that. What did you do in this world? How sincere were your actions? Okay. The heart plays a vital role. And in doing so, we have to understand that, if we spend our entire life strengthening, purifying, fortifying this heart, then we've done something in our life. Now, let's define a few terms tonight. It's important that we do this. A lot of you have heard these terms up and down the Quran, qalb and ruh, nafs, right? You've heard of, what else? There's qalb, there's nafs, there's ruh, there's one more that's not in my head right now. But all of these are realities, okay? And all of them attached to this I-ness that I have. Let's explain this I-ness. I've done it before. Ashra I had on Salat during the days of Imam Sajjad Shahadat. But because this is very much marboot and related to our discussion tonight, let's understand this a little bit, and I would need your undivided attention, please. Let's recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjil farajahum. And I promise you, 45 minutes with Masayid. That's how long I'll take. I understand that in this virtual world, it's very hard to look at a screen and to follow along through a device. It's not like you're in front of me or you can see me on the member live. It's difficult, no doubt. As hard as it is sometimes to listen to a device, it's also hard to talk to a camera when there's nobody around you. But anyways, we do our best. So give me about 20 minutes of your time with Masayib, inshallah, and then your zahmat is over for today. When I talk about the idea of my or I or me, I am this, my hands, my wealth, my height, my this. What is that I we're talking about? Is it a physical body? Is it the physical body? Is it my hands? Does it mean that, it's there? Because, if God forbid my hand was to be cut off, for example, the hand will be gone, but the my would stay, right? My car, for example, okay, if the car, for example, is sold or, it's no longer on your driveway, the car is gone, but did the my go along with the car? No, the my stayed, the car left. Okay, my house, if you sell your house and move on, this house is no longer yours. The house is gone, but the my stays, right? So what is this I-ness? Let's understand very quickly, and I'll do my best to simplify it for me. MashaAllah, the Majma' al-Idara is used to many, many ulama. And this is, just in terms of a reference, Ayatollah al-Misbah Yazdi has a book called Theological Instructions. A book called Amuzish Aqaid in Farsi. 60 different durus that are taught in the Hawza across several years that go from all the way from Mafhum Deen, Deen Shanasi, understanding Deen, all the way to Ma'ad and Day of Judgment, everything in between. From Adalah to Imamah to everything. In there, a discussion in the section on Ma'ad talks about the immaterial nature of the soul. We refer to as Ruh Mujarrad. Okay. If we understand the spirit and the self to be immaterial, the I to be immaterial, not bound by space or time like this body is, then the hereafter makes sense. If we see ourselves only through the eyes of the maddi and the jism and the material and matter, then the hereafter won't make sense. And if that hereafter doesn't make sense, it'll be out of our mind. We won't even attempt to prepare for it until it's too late. So this discussion is vital. And he talks about this I-ness inside of this discussion inside of his book. He says if you examine the human being, the physical journey of the human being, from the day that we were born until you are today. So there are many of you right now who are in your teenage years, in your 20s, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. Let's say, for example, we talk about somebody who is now a senior, a grandfather or grandmother, let's say in their 70s. okay? And you're going through an old photo album, for example, okay? And if they still have pictures of when they were a child, let's say in India, Pakistan, wherever you're from, they'll show you, let's say, for example, this is a picture of me when I was 3 years old in the lap of my father. And you're like, oh my God, Daddy, that's you? Yeah, that's you? Yeah, with the kajal down the side of the face and the yeah, that's me. And that frilly dress, yes, that's me. Wow, I can't believe that's you. Meaning that a picture of the person in front of you who's there live, and that picture is so different that the picture is unrecognizable. And yet it's the same person. So Agha Misbah says that when you are born, to when you become a toddler, to when you become a child, a young adult, a teenager, in your 20s, in your 30s, that physical journey is so different and so fluctuating that sometimes it's unrecognizable. Okay? Now, for example, if you look at, for example, my pictures when I was a baby, I was an adorable baby. I think I was the cutest baby ever. Just pink and just beautiful and just like a lot like I am now. Just very handsome and very, good looking, and, it's hard to focus on the words. And, I was like that since I was born. But then I went through, it's just a joke. But and then I went through this stage where it was an awkward teenager, right? And if I was to show you my pictures when I was, let's say, 2 or 3 years old, you may not recognize me. The point is that we go through a physical journey that is so different that literally you can't recognize the person anymore. And yet it's the same person. Dadi was in front of me, and the same Dadi is inside that picture. Although they're two unrecognizable faces, they don't even match anymore. So it's not like this is Dadi version 2.0 and that's version 1.0. Or it's not like it's a different person. Please follow me. Okay? So all throughout the various physical differences that we go through in our physical body and our life, it grows, it expands, right? We lose weight, we gain weight, we grow a beard, God forbid we shave off the beard, we lose our hair, we grow our hair, right? All these things, right? All of those different fluctuations inside of the body doesn't change the fact that you are still who you are. Okay? My fluctuation in the physical world from when I was 3 to when I was 18 to when I was 21 to now that I'm in, however old I am, I won't give you that satisfaction, however old I am, all of it is very different. Oh my God, you look so different, to the point of somebody from my grade 7 class saw me today, they may not recognize me, but I've never stopped being Asad and Asad Jafri. The I-ness that is there from the moment that I was born till today, that unifying factor that Agha Misbah says, there's a unifying factor that exists in every unique, awkward stage of the physical growth of the human being. That unifying factor is the I, is me. Okay? I can line up pictures of when I was 6 months old, 6 years old, 16 years old, 26 years old, 36 years old. All of them together, all of them are 6 different faces. But Asad Jafri, Asad Jafri, Asad Jafri, Asad Jafri. Okay? And because obviously, it's not material based, all of them, because it's one factor in a fluctuating array, it is immaterial by its nature. Okay? Now this I-ness inside of me, that's immaterial, that's mujarrad, sometimes takes the form of a qalb, sometimes can be referred to as the nafs, sometimes can be referred to as the aql, sometimes can be referred to as the ruh. That's the 4 main ones. And I get so many questions, what is the difference between these 4, right? The one common denominator in all 4 of these discussions is the I don't change. But sometimes, for example, when I am in tune with my desires, or my emotions, or my anger, or my, or my courage, or my fear. All of these various elements that make up my emotion, that kind of represent the haywan inside of me, the animal inside of me, is the I-ness plus the qalb. Okay? When I'm sitting there trying to understand reason and mathematical equations, When I'm sitting there, for example, trying to teach a 16-year-old why God has to exist through the mind, at that moment, there's no desire, anger, and cowardness. There is the idea that now he's locked in or she's locked in with her intellect, trying really hard to understand what is Syed Asad trying to prove to me, right? That's the I-ness plus the aql, plus the intellect. Okay? When we are in tune with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we are reminded of our reality, when we remind ourselves what the purpose is in this whole thing called life, when those moments happen of tafakkur, when those moments happen that we are looking now, the Quran says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. The Quran says that there are those now who remember Allah, يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قَيَامًا وَقَعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ, standing, sitting, lying on their side. Meaning what? In all states they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they ponder, يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, on the creation of the heaven and the earth. When we go through those moments, and we do have reflection, introspection, that's the I-ness plus the ruh of the insan, the spirit of the insan. Remember now, when Allah describes the creation of Adam, فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. When we created his surat and his form, Adam's, and we blew into him from my spirit, meaning Allah's spirit blew into Adam. That spirit is somewhere inside of us. Sometimes it comes to the forefront, sometimes it goes back. Okay? And when we now engage in animalistic actions, our anger gets the best of us. We end up, punching a hole in the wall, or we end up now committing a sin, or we end up now giving into our desires and lust. That's the I-ness plus the nafs. Okay? So the common reality in all four of these is the I-ness, in the qalb, in the aql, in the ruh, in the nafs. Okay? And this reality now has to now continue throughout. And all four of them exist. And sometimes one of them overpowers the other three. Sometimes it takes a backseat. Right? And we literally now jump. That's why, oftentimes I say that one of the most complex dimensions of us was captured very nicely by one of my teachers. He says, and he used examples of a war. He says in a war, there's two opposing armies, right? And those two opposing armies, of course, want to accomplish two vastly different things. And each of the armies have their own respective commanders of their army. And that commander of the army, the job is to train his soldiers to what? To conquer the other army, very simply. And they are always two different individuals. The complexity of the human being, why we are so ajib and strange and unique, perhaps is a better word, is the fact that there are opposing factors inside of us. Think about it. This nafs inside of us that just wants to be hakim, that nafs just wants to turn us into an animalistic existence, an instinctive human being. This whole idea and this whole concept that, you do you and you live only once, and this is your time, it's my time, and this and that, you do you, boo, and all these things that I hear in this, nowadays on social media, and these hashtags that a lot of our kids and our youth are using. I don't think they have any idea what that means. All of that is just the idea that, look, don't be bound by repercussions, don't be bound by accountability, don't be bound by responsibility, right? This is your time to fly, man. You do whatever you want. If you want to do this, do it. Haram, halal, jais, not jais, horrible for your family, destructive for your soul, who cares? You do you, man. You do what you got to do. Right? That's the nafs inside of us that is really, that wants us to have nothing to do with God whatsoever, and then, of course, lead us towards shaitan and into his army. Then there are those forces, of course, that are trying to purify us. So when we're on our hands and knees begging towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when our qalb is in the state of that iqbal, we are welcoming that worship now. We can't wait for the nights of Qadr, for example. I can't wait, let's say, for example, I want to read Quran today. So you're not checking how long the para or the surah is, okay, I still have 200 pages, okay. right? That's not happening, right? You're actually, there's there's a little bit of contentment in that. So there are opposing forces inside of us. Now, the ajib nature of the human being is that while there are two opposing forces inside of us, the commander is one. And that's me. I am the commander of both armies. And the successful one is the one who simply now strengthens the right army. That's it. To simplify what our journey in this world is to make sure that we strengthen the army of Allah as opposed to the army of shaitan. Sounds simple enough. It's a day-to-day, hour by hour sometimes, battle. There's scars, there's wounds, there's trauma, there's difficulties, there's successes, there's victory. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you look at the concept of certain things that we accept at the mind that we don't accept at the heart, then that's an imbalance. Both of them have to work together. One of the things that I think today's youth have a tough time understanding is what is referred to as the perennial leap of faith. Okay? There comes a moment now where, we understand things. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I know that, but the I know resides up here. The but means that the I know hasn't come down to I believe and I want. I know there's a God, but do I have to worship him this way? I know there's a God, but do I have to wear hijab? I know inside the aql, the but is not inside the heart. Right? I know that there's Allah, that's why I worship him, is where the aql is now on and the heart is now on. Look at the difference now. I know there's God, but why do I need to worship him this way? I know there's God, which is why I worship him this way. There's a big difference in two statements. And the difference is the heart in the one statement is turned on and the other time is turned off. Now, naturally, there are reasons for that, guys. There's distractions in this world. There are things that are made to preoccupy the heart of our youth today. There are those that have infiltrated inside of our heart. There are those things that are feel-good, haram things in this world that are made to distract us, right? وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَحْوًا وَلَعَبٌ. The life in this world is nothing but a play, a sport. It's fuzuli. It's nothing worth attaching yourself to. That's what this life is. If we want true life, وَإِنَّ دَارُ الْآخِرَةَ فَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. This hayawan, this pure life is not in this world, it's in Dar al-Akhirah, in the hereafter abode. So naturally the heart now gets distracted, the heart now gets tainted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now is trying to enter this heart, it's completely full, so he leaves. Al-qalbu haramullah fala tuskin haramullah ghayrullah. Right? Imam Salih says that the heart is the sanctuary of God, and do not allow anything to reside in that haram, in that sanctuary, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the heart now plays a vital role. A little bit of a spoiler alert for tomorrow. The heart becomes the driver's seat, the driver of the vehicle. The mind can know 1,000 things, but until the heart accepts it, they'll remain up here as ma'lumat. Just like clouds in the sky, hadith says, what we know will also fade away if it's not attached and if it's not tied by the hearts. The heart takes it from floating in the earth, grabs it and gives it a home and anchors it inside of us, and then it becomes part of our amal. That's precisely why the deen of Islam came about. This is exactly why the Ahlul Bayt gave so much, including their own life now, for this very cause. It's not just a matter of what you know, it's what the heart accepts and what you believe in. And while tonight there are, two different amazing personalities for us to remember in our masa'ib, the musibat of Imam Mujtaba is the musibat of the Holy Prophet and vice versa. But I want to speak a little bit about Imam Mujtaba alayhi salam. One of the most oppressed imams that we have, an imam that no doubt continues to be an imam that is victim of propaganda. Muawiyah gave Imam Mujtaba, he tried now 7 different times, he gave Imam Mujtaba poison to kill him. And all 7 times he survived. through various means, through various outside forces. When finally Abul Fazl Abbas says to Imam Hassan, Bhaiya, now your health is in my hands. I'm not going to let anybody come anywhere near you. This was not just Abbas who would protect Hussein Day of Ashura. This was Abbas who looked after all of the kids of Ali and the children of Fatima. Muawiyah understood that Imam Hassan Mujtaba is now surrounded. He's protected very well. And so he realized that if I want to get to him, I have to get to him through an internal source. And Ju'ada, his wife, is what Muawiyah chose. Threw the world at her, the riches at her, gave her all sorts of promises. The one act I want you to do is poison your own husband. She agrees. Some reports say that Imam Mujtaba would sleep in one room. On one side would be Imam Hussein, a little bit down another room, albeit connected, would be Bibi Zainab. And they say Ju'da now in the middle of the night comes. There is some water beside Imam Mujtaba, and she drops a few drops of poison inside of that water. You should know the poison now given to Imam Mujtaba for the 8th different time. 7 times he survived fine, but every time it had a little bit of effect, it took a little bit out of him. This was a poison that Muawiyah ordered from Rome, some say. That if you drop 1 drop of poison on grass, that grass would die immediately. Imam Hassan now wakes up in the middle of the night, picks up this glass of water, looks at it now, and some say that he was reading something. I don't think it was the dua before water. Maybe he was saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He takes 1 small sip and that's enough. At that moment, the reports say that he fell off his bed. Bibi Zainab comes running. Imam Hussein comes running. Bhaiya, what's wrong? Bhaiya, what's wrong? The poison now gets to him. At that moment now, he begins to slowly leave this world, watching now, Bibi Zainab watching her brother now, choke up now, pieces of the internal organs of his body. Imam Hussein looks at Imam Mujtaba, begins to cry. Imam Hassan looks at Hussein's tears, says, Bhaiya, please, don't cry. There'll be a day, unlike any other, that will be your day. On that day, there'll be nobody there to cry for you. Please, dry your tears. The janazah of Imam Mujtaba was prepared. One last mention. The janazah now was carried outside towards Baqi, but there came a moment now where Abul Fazl is there, Hussein is there. They put the mayyit down. The moment they put the mayyit down, some say that there was a shower of arrows that came towards the body of Imam Mujtaba, began to hit the taboot of Imam Mujtaba. It turns around now. Hussein now brings him back home. Bibi Zainab, who's sitting there crying inside the home, the door opens and she sees now this taboot come back of her brothers covered in arrows. Hussein now calls Zainab. Zainab, come. On one side of Imam Hassan's taboot is Zainab. On one side is Hussein, pulling out the arrows one by one. What a grand service, Zainab, you gave your brother. My heart tells me that what could she be thinking on the day of Ashura when she's leaving towards Sham and Kufa, and there lied her brother on the plains of Karbala, arrow after arrow, zakham after zakham. Bhaiya, I was able to pull out the arrows for Imam Mujtaba's janazah, but what do I do now? My hands are tied. There's rope around my arms. I'm majboor to leave you like this on the plains of Karbala. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshaAllah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give us that tawfiq to understand the beauty of the heart and the strength of the mind. We ask you, Allah, to weaken the hands of the enemies of humanity, to strengthen the mustaza'af in all of the world. And finally, Allah, one dua that we have on this day of Friday, that you make us worthy of the Imam's zuhur when he arrives, inshaAllah. Matam ya Hussein, ya Hussein.
Syed Hussein, Jazakallah khair, Syed, for that incredible lecture. At this time, we kindly request Brother Dawood Naqvi for a noha. Hussein, Hussein, Hussein.
Hussein, Hussein. Ajeeb haal mein hai Fatima ke dono pe sar, Hasan کے تیر بدن میں حسین تیروں پر عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پسر حسن کو دیکھا ہے قاسم نے خون گلتے ہوئے حسن کو دیکھا ہے قاسم نے خون گلتے ہوئے سکینہ دیکھتی ہے باپ کو تہے خنجر عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پسر نہ جانے دیکھے ہیں زینب نے دشت میں کیسے نہ جانے دیکھے ہیں زینب نے دشت میں کیسے جگر کے ٹکڑے حسن کے کبھی حسین کا سر عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پسر حسن کے بیٹے کے امت نے کر دیے ٹکڑے حسن کے بیٹے کے امت نے کر دیے ٹکڑے حسین لاتے ہیں ٹکڑے وہ سارے چن چن کر عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پسر ادھر حسین کے جنازے پر پھول تیروں کے ادھر حسین کے جنازے پر پھول تیروں کے ادھر حسین کے لاشے کی نظر ہے پتھر عجیب حال میں ہے فاطمہ کے دونوں پسر حسین
حسین
Mominin Mominat, we will take a short break of around 10 minutes and 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll be back by 8:45 for our Urdu program, inshallah.